One of the greatest things about our country is the Bill of Rights. You know, when we passed the Constitution, many people were fearful that if specific rights were not enumerated, they might be taken away. I think other people said, well, we don't need a Bill of Rights. Who could imagine a time when we would take away the right to trial? Who can imagine a time when you wouldn't get a lawyer or that you could be held indefinitely without a trial? So some people opposed the Bill of Rights and said, we don't need this because it's so obvious that no one in their right mind would ever argue that an American citizen or someone apprehended or accused of a crime in the United States would be held without limit, would be sent to a camp in another country and held forever without a trial. None of our founding fathers ever imagined that could happen. And yet here we are. Here we are at a time where just 4 or 5 years ago, this body passed a bill that says that an American citizen can be detained forever. That an American citizen accused of a crime in the United States could be sent to a foreign camp and held forever without trial. When you mention to this people are incredulous. They're like, who is the person that would object to the Bill of Rights? Who is it that possibly objects to the Fifth and the Sixth Amendment? Well, you're going to hear from that person shortly, because it's one person in the U.S. Senate that objects to the Fifth and the Sixth Amendment applying to those who are accused of a crime in our country. Captured in our country and accused of a crime in our country, this person would deny you a lawyer. This person believes that the entire world is a battlefield, including the U.S., so we need to have martial law. Martial law in the United States. This person discounts the whole presumption that you are presumed to be innocent until found guilty. Why is this a problem? Well, after 9/11, we captured 119 people and we tortured them. Our government tortured them, but in retrospect, we found out that 26 out of the 119 were the wrong person. Does anybody remember a time in our history when black people were lynched because they were presumed to be guilty? This is what this is about. This is about people accused of a crime, not declared guilty, not found guilty, but you're willing to lock them up without a trial? I cannot think of anything more un-American. You will hear from today the representative of the un-American position that the Fifth and the Sixth Amendment don't apply to everybody. Now, some will say, oh, the Fifth Amendment just applies to citizens, and maybe we could talk about citizens but not non-citizens. The Fifth Amendment says no person shall be held or deprived of their liberty or due process. That means the whole idea of going to court. Nobody captured in this country can be deprived of that. The Sixth Amendment says in all prosecutions, the accused, not just American citizens, the accused. Now, people will say, but we're talking about terrorists here and they're terrible people. Absolutely, they're terrible people. Everybody would want to punish the guilty terrorist. But do you want to punish people only accused of terrorism? You say, well, it's a terrible crime. We might as well just throw out the Constitution, throw out the Bill of Rights, and why don't we just lock these people up, or better yet, kill them? That is the mentality of lynching. That is the mentality of locking up all the Japanese during World War II. Is that who we are as a people? They will have won after 9/11 if we give up on the Bill of Rights. If we give up on who we are, they will have won. We presume people to be innocent. We don't lock people up because they're Japanese, not any longer. We don't lynch people because they're black, not any longer, because the Bill of Rights applies to everyone. But if you say, well, he's accused of terrorism, he shouldn't get a trial, or she shouldn't get a trial. We've had 386 people accused of terrorism in our country. Every one of them have been convicted. The man who killed 13 people in New York City the other day, if I'm on the jury, I vote to convict. But I want to hear the evidence first. I want to know they got the right person. I want to know someone saw him do it, that there is evidence. Not just because he has brown skin, we're going to lock him up and lock him up forever without a trial. We've convicted everybody tried in the United States. We didn't give up on who we are. And yet the law currently says, thanks to several individuals, says that you can be detained forever without a trial. Now, President Obama signed this law, but even President Obama knew that it was a terrible law. He said, this law and this power is so terrible that I will never use it. But that's not what the law is about. The law is about being so good that even when you get a rotten person in office someday, they don't have the power to do this. What happens if someday we elect someone who is a bigot, or someone who says gay people should be guilty, or someone who says brown people are non-Christians or Christians or homeschoolers, you name it? You can be a minority of the color of your skin or a minority of your ideology, but we should never let the government lock you up without a trial, without a lawyer. My amendment that I've been trying to get for 6 years simply restates the Constitution, restates the Bill of Rights. It says that no declaration of war will allow people apprehended in the United States to be held without a trial. We not only can't get this passed, we can't get a vote on it because certain individuals have such disregard for American tradition, disregard for the presumption of innocence, and disregard for the Bill of Rights, they object to even having a vote. So we've been trying for 6 years to have a vote on this. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that it be in order to call my amendment, which would forbid indefinite detention of American citizens and others who are accused of a crime, Amendment 2795, to be amended to Amendment 2282.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
Senator from South Carolina.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, and I'll try to be brief, and I appreciate Senator Paul's passion. He's been doing this for 6 years. I think he's been wrong for 6 years. And let me just say something. There's a reason I'm not talking about eye surgery on the floor. I don't know anything about it. You're talking about legal concepts you clearly don't know anything about. You're fighting a crime, I'm fighting a war. If it were up to Senator Paul, there'd be no difference between a criminal and a warrior. Radical Islam, in the form of ISIS, they're not trying to steal your car or break in your house, they're trying to destroy your way of life. So if you believe we're at war like I do, we should apply the law of war. For 33 years, I was a military lawyer, a prosecutor, defense attorney, and a military judge. I think I know the difference between fighting a crime and fighting a war. When it comes to fighting a war, if you capture somebody who's part of the enemy force, Senator Paul, the last thing we worry about is how to try them. We want to hold them under the law of war to gather intelligence, to make sure we understand what this person knows about any enemy operations. We had 450,000 German and Japanese prisoners in the United States. Guess what? Not one of them had a lawyer. If you had said what he just said in World War II, they'd run you out of town. Most Americans would find it odd that a Japanese and German prisoner of war would be entitled to a lawyer under the Bill of Rights, because they're not. We're fighting a war, and I'd like to win the war sooner rather than later. When it comes to killing the enemy, that's part of war. But if you're lucky enough, clever enough to capture one of these bad guys, the last thing I want them to hear is you have a right to a lawyer. You don't. Under military law, no enemy prisoner has a right to a lawyer. You're talking about fighting a crime, I'm talking about fighting a war. There are 44 people in Gitmo that have been held for over a decade that will never see the light of day because they're part of the enemy force. They've had due process under the law of war, and they're too dangerous to let go. They're not going to be tried in federal court. They're not going to be tried by military commission because they're too dangerous to let go, and we have no interest in a trial. We have an interest in keeping them off the battlefield. They will die in jail without a trial. That's what happens when you join Al-Qaeda or ISIS. You can get killed or you can die in jail. So if you're an American citizen thinking about joining ISIS, don't. You're not going to be captured because the color of your skin or your religion or your political views. You'll be captured because you've turned on your own country. In every war we've ever had, American citizens have unfortunately sided with the enemy. Guess what ISIS is trying to do as I speak? Recruit people in their own backyard. How many people have bought the propaganda over the internet? The two guys in Boston, one of them had permanent status. They bought into this crazy construct that you got to kill everybody in the name of religion. The guy who ran over the folks in New York. All these people have one thing in common. They were radicalized by the enemy. They became soldiers of the caliphate. So here's what I'm trying to say. It's not my view of the Constitution that I want you to look at. It's what the Supreme Court has said. In Ex parte Curran, a 1942 case, it involved capturing German saboteurs in Long Island. Now, the last time I checked, Long Island, New York is part of the United States. You had American citizens collaborating with the enemy. They were captured as a group. The American citizens were tried by military commission, and one of them was executed. Why? Because under the law of war, once you join the enemy, your American citizenship doesn't protect you from the consequence of your act. N. Ray Curran said, citizenship in the United States of an enemy belligerent does not relieve him of the consequences of belligerency, which is unlawful because it is in violation of law of war. In 2009, an American citizen captured in Afghanistan fighting for the Taliban. There's no bar to this nation's holding one of its own citizens as an enemy combatant. For those who understand the law of war, this is one of the timeless concepts. He's trying to turn the war into a crime. Now, I agree with Senator Paul. If you're charged with a crime, you can't be held indefinitely and questioned without legal representation because you're being accused of a crime and you have rights as a criminal defendant. When you become an enemy combatant, you have rights under the law of war, and there is no right for an enemy prisoner to be given a lawyer.
Does the senator from South Carolina object?
I object. And I had so much more to offer, but I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr.
The
President.
senator from Kentucky.
I think it's important to listen to what you heard and analyze what you heard because apparently if you're defined as an enemy combatant, it would be okay not to have a trial, not to have a lawyer, and you wouldn't be presumed innocent, you would be presumed guilty. But the question you have to ask is who gets to define the enemy combatant? So if the government gets to define you as an enemy combatant, is it not conceivable that you could be an enemy combatant because you are a minority, either of skin color or of ideology?